Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Mr. Robot Season 3, Episode 10, Shutdown. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Mr. Robot, so I have to start with a spoiler warning for Mr. Robot up to the Season 3 finale. If you haven't seen all of Season 3, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So this was a pretty good episode. If you've been watching my reviews up to now, I was curious to whether or not the finale would live up to the greatness of Season 3. I was hoping that it wouldn't be sort of just fizzle out and just be like fillers set up and not really do anything. I was saying specifically last week that I was hoping we'd get some sort of conclusion. And did we? Yes, we most certainly did. But did it live up to everything I was hoping it to be? I would say not completely, not entirely. This episode was really unexpected. Like, it subverted expectations. It went in completely different directions than I thought the show would go in. Now, part of me, though, isn't really entirely sure that's a good thing. Like, part of me is a bit disappointed that the show didn't go in the direction that I was thinking it would go in. But I think ultimately it's a good thing when the shows can be unpredictable and fresh and actually surprise you and do things that you don't expect. And I think with this episode in particular, it was really, really intense. It was a very edge of your seat, really intense episode. There were parts of this episode, particularly the scene where they're in the barn, in the shack, where I was just like, oh my god, this is so amazing. This is such great storytelling. It was so intense. I was on the edge of my seat. I did have some issues with the episode, none the least being the post-credit scene, but I'll get to that shortly. But I think ultimately, like, the way the episode ended, it kind of felt like it wasn't, like, it leaves some things open-ended for future seasons, but it felt like almost like a conclusion, like it didn't set things up for the next season as much as I would prefer, and it seemed like it didn't do a very good job of having me, like, really wanting to see what happens next. I think part of that may be because it wasn't announced until like the morning of this episode aired that Mr. Robot will be getting a season 4, which thank God. But at the time of making this episode, it seems like they were still incredibly uncertain of whether or not they would get another season. So it seems like they purposely made this episode, even though like it wouldn't conclude the story and there's still a lot of things open-ended, that if the show ended here, it would be somewhat conclusive, like it didn't end like in the middle of a cliffhanger going, oh. So if the show ended, then you could say, okay, this is the conclusion. Even though it feels kind of incomplete, it would still be like less incomplete, say if it ended in season 2 or season 1 where everything was left open. And I don't know, I think that kind of hindered it a little bit because I find myself less interested in season 4 now, especially after that post-credit scene. But anyway, let's get into this episode and let's start with Elliot. So it's very interesting. The episode starts with those guys ransacking Elliot's room, and he's sort of hiding next door, and then he finds that he's looking for Darlene. She doesn't meet up with him where he says, and so she's starting to figure out that something's gone wrong. And of course he's able to piece together that the FBI has her and that the FBI is corrupt by the Dark Army, so the Dark Army has her. And so first of all, I really love how he's really like, his whole goal is to find Darlene. Like, nothing else is really concerned with him. He's more concerned for his own sister's safety. Now, this is one of the rare times I think we actually seen him like that. So he's actually concerned for her and has that little brotherly love. So I thought that was really a great character beat for Elliot, that this was his main motivation, was the safety of his sister, because he even said, oh shit, this is all my fault. And that's true. Like, it is all of his fault. Like, Mobley and Trenton and like a lot of other people died because of what he did, and he's finally starting to face that and be like, I can't, like, if his sister died, then that would just be the end of him. That would be something that he would not be able to cope with if she died because of something he did. So it was really interesting that was his main motivation. Now, and also he wanted to reconnect with Mr. Robot because he thinks, and correctly, that Mr. Robot has some more information about this that would help him find Darlene, because he was trying to think and come to some plan to try to get her, but he just didn't have enough information. He's like, Mr. Robot probably has more information. Now, it's interesting that his way to reconnect with Mr. Robot is to go on the Ferris wheel, which of course we saw them go on. I think it was the first or maybe second episode of the entire show where they first start talking about the plans to hack E-Corp. Was on the Ferris wheel, and of course this is like a childhood memory, and so it's sort of a way for him to reconnect with himself. And then we learn in this scene that Elliot was the one blocking Mr. Robot, and that's why the two haven't been communicating. It's all been sort of Elliot's conscious decision to not want to talk to him. So basically this scene is him letting him back in, and I love how Elliot, and he said this in the earlier episodes, but he admits to Mr. Robot that I missed you, and I wanted, you to be part of me again. And so Mr. Robot at first is a bit skeptical, and because Elliot asks him about the 71 buildings, would you have done that if you knew the Dark Army was going to do it? And Mr. Robot says, no, I wouldn't have. I would have found another way. I don't know, like at first I didn't quite believe him, but there's something this scene says, and it's hammered in later on in the episode as well, is that part of Elliot exists in Mr. Robot, which is sort of was sort of hammered in. So I think he's actually telling the truth, that if he knew there was 71 buildings he was okay with, but like 71 buildings, like thousands of people, that was too much even for him, and that he wouldn't have done it. So I actually take him at his word here. But so he knows about Santiago, so he leads Elliot to Santiago and his house, and so they search it to try to find a way to rescue Darlene. And that's when they run into Irving, and he takes him to the barn. And this is a different direction I thought the episode would go in, because I thought it would play more on the fact that Elliot had the Dark Army. He owned the Dark Army, as he said. He had hacked them. He knew everything about them. So I thought he would use that to his advantage, but instead he just gets captured by Irving. And I love how when Irving's talking and you hear Elliot's inner monologue trying to think of a plan, and then you hear Irving say, I know you're trying to think of a plan, but don't, just take the easy way out and come with me. So that was kind of cool. I like how that played out. So they went to the barn, and so then I love how Mr. Robot and Elliot were sort of working together when they're in the barn. They're sort of talking to each other. So it's showing that Elliot has sort of reconnected with Mr. Robot. Although I was a bit disappointed that we didn't get any talk about how Mr. Robot is basically on the same side as Elliot now, because we didn't get any talk of what Irving showed Mr. Robot in the episode 7 or 8, I think it was. No, 7, where Irving showed Mr. Robot the rich party and saying we're the ones manipulating you. So Mr. Robot's come to the realization that the whole thing has been manipulated from the rich all along. So that actually puts him on the same side as Elliot, but instead, I wish they would have mentioned that, but instead Mr. Robot seemed to be arguing with Elliot a bit on the Ferris wheel and stuff, and be like, oh, he's still defending his actions, where I think he should actually know better by now and realize that he was being used by the rich and resent that, and that they would try to work together to bring down White Rose and the rich and all that. Although they do kind of state that by the end of the episode. But still, I wish they got more into that. But it was good seeing them work together, where Mr. Robot was scoping out the guards and whatnot. And I like how you can see Mr. Robot and Elliot talking, but the other characters weren't reacting to them. So it's kind of implying that this is an internal monologue inside Elliot's head, so he's not actually speaking aloud. Which I know, like, other times, like, you get this monologue between, or dialogue between Mr. Robot and Elliot, and other characters will react. And Elliot would be like, shit, did I say that aloud? And so, almost like every time he talks to Mr. Robot, he actually speaks aloud. So I like that they didn't do that. I like that the characters didn't react, so they were implying that he wasn't actually speaking aloud. But it's cool that they were sort of working together. He was scoping out, okay, how do we take down these guards, whatever. But Elliot had a different plan, a more bold plan, and that was to just confront White Rose's aide and say, look, and I got this. And he knew that White Rose was watching. He saw that camera and knew that White Rose would be ever attentive and everywhere. So he was more of appealing to her directly. But the aide was the one that showed up, so he was like, look, I have you guys by the balls. I know everything about you. And if you kill me, he even said if you kill Darlene, then all this is getting released and you'll be entirely exposed. And then that doesn't work. The guy's like, well, we can recover from being exposed, but you can't recover from a bullet in the head. And I think he's kind of understating how much they could recover from being exposed. I'm not quite sure White Rose would agree with his assessment, and I think that's confirmed by what she does. And then Elliot tries a different tact of, well, I can help you. I know you're trying to get the stuff to the Congo. You're trying to move your things to Congo and you're being blocked. I can help you overcome that. I can get it there like that, which of course we see how much that was White Rose's goal. But of course the aide, he seems to be overtaken by jealousy and just does not like Elliot and just wants him dead more than anything. So he's just like, now screw you, I'm going to kill you anyway. So, which surprised me, they were going to go to kill him. And then we see Leon kills his goons instead. The AIDS goons. So this is pretty interesting. So how did Leon know this? Did Leon just guess that White Rose would want him to do? Because it's kind of implied that White Rose sort of changed her mind when Elliot appealed to her and said, look, I can get the stuff to the Congo, which is what she really wanted. Plus, also probably didn't want all of her stuff to be exposed. So, how did Leon know that? Because it seems like, White Rose wanted to kill Elliot when Leon went into the barn, but during that time, she changed her mind. Did he just assume that's what she'd want him to do, or did he have like a little thing in his ear, where she was actually talking to him saying, kill those other guys and don't let Elliot die? I don't know. But anyway, Leon's portrayed as a bit of a badass. Too bad we didn't get any TV show talk and binge watch talk in this episode, but that's so good. So, because even after Leon killed those guys, he's like, okay, Elliot, you made a promise, live up to your end of the bargain, and if you don't live up, if this doesn't go through, then you know what's going to happen. So it's obvious that the only reason that they spared him is because of what he made, what his promise. And I also think that White Rose is going to value Elliot a hell of a lot more, because apparently, she didn't know that he was capable of that, of completely owning them and hacking them, and was able to fix the problem that all of her top aides and even herself couldn't fix. So I think she's going to value Elliot a lot more, and I think that's another part of the reason why she let him live, not just to keep up her end of the bargain, which I don't really trust her to be that honorable, but I think it has more to do with the fact that she can really see his value now. She kind of did see it before a little bit, but now she totally sees it. And I think she was kind of right to call out her aide for being jealousy-ridden, which was pretty freaking obvious that he was in fact jealousy-ridden and just wanted to kill Elliot. And so basically orders him to kill himself, and being the good soldier, like that speech he gave to Mobley and Trenton, saying there's no better, honorable way to go than suicide in the line of duty to accomplish the goal. So that's what we see. He blows his brains out. And so that seems to be the end of that. They let Elliot and Darlene go. And it's also interesting because when Elliot, like, they even said, like, to Elliot, like, I know you want to undo the 5-9 hack, but White Rose doesn't care about that anymore, because we've seen, like, in earlier scenes, the 5-9 hack accomplished a specific goal of getting, like, changing government policy or whatever. So that's already been accomplished. So she's already used 5-9 for her purposes, and so to undo it would make no difference to her whatsoever. So that's why they're like, oh, if you want to undo it, go ahead. So that's what Elliot and Darlene go to do next. So this is where, I don't know, I get kind of iffy on it, because I see where they're going, like, because it was before it was told they were able to undo it because Romero recorded everything, every keystroke, but here we find out it wasn't really Romero, it was Mr. Robot. And this is sort of to further drive home the point that there's a part of Elliot in Mr. Robot. I mean, it makes sense as a part of Elliot and Mr. Robot because they are, after all, the same person, and so this is sort of driving the home that they can work together. But I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of the misdirection of it wasn't really Romero, it was Mr. Robot. Huh. I mean, that seemed like a bit of a twist that was not entirely necessary. I know it was trying to build the character, Mr. Robot and Elliot reconnecting, but I think they did that enough in other ways that they didn't really need that, and it felt just kind of a slightly bit contrived to me, anyway. So anyway, they once Elliot figures out it was Mr. Robot who did it, so he's able to crack the code and undo everything, and that's how the episode ends, with him undoing the 5-9 hack. And then we get this stuff with Elliot and Darlene in the subway also, where she's saying that his father didn't push him out the window, that he jumped, that he went crazy with the bat, and so that's interesting. That puts a spin on everything. That kind of brings back to his sort of mental problems, that it was actually, you could say, it was Mr. Robot that pushed him out the window from his perspective, and that's when this Mr. Robot, who was actually his father's image, first appeared, and that's why. And maybe it's just the way he replayed it in his mind, because it's already been established that his memories are very faulty. But yeah, again, that's not something, I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of that. So anyway, let me talk about the post-credit scene. We get this post-credit scene where the first part was kind of interesting, is Darlene talking to this prostitute. It was really random, just talking to some random prostitute about the 5-9 hack. And I guess it's interesting that they use like a prostitute to show us like wisdom, and she was brought up a really good point about how if the 5-9 hack was undone, it wouldn't necessarily fix everything, because corporations, the way they work in power, tend to consolidate. Like, the whole trickle-down economics is bullshit. Like, they don't actually trickle things down. So if everything goes right for them, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to pass that on to everyone else. However, as Darlene says, it could translate into just the economy getting healthier, so then maybe eventually, it would just work an overall healthier economy, so things won't be as bad as they are now, but won't be as simple as it's not gonna be a magic redo button, like, everything's fine now. So that was kind of interesting, and I think that's what is going to lead into season 4 being interesting, is dealing with how they actually try to undo this and whatever. And of course, Elliot also, he sort of makes a pact with Mr. Robot to go after the rich, whatever. So that's another thing that's sort of leading to season 4. But I don't know, like, who he's talking about, the rich. He says all of them. And I'm like, well, that's what he tried to do with 5-9. It didn't work. So I was hoping for a more specific thing against White Rose, because that's what we got at the end of episode 9. It seems like, and that was the one thing I was slightly disappointed in the direction that this episode went in, as opposed to episode 9, because episode 9 was I thought they were all gonna work towards taking down White Rose, like him, Dom, Darlene, all of them gonna just team up and become White Rose's biggest nightmare. But at the end of this episode, it seems like White Rose has kind of got him under his pocket again. Of course, Dom, I'll get to her later. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's the direction. And so his threat about going after the rich seems kind of empty to me after the events of this episode. But I don't know. Maybe they'll find a way to make it strong again in the next season. Anyway, post-credit scene. Sorry, I'm going to have to get to this bit. I think this is the worst reveal ever. If you're familiar with my channel at all, you know what I think is the worst episode of Mr. Robot ever. In fact, I think this episode was so bad that I really, honestly, no hyperbole, almost quit the show. Like, after I watched this episode, I was so upset. I was so angry. I was like, I'm never watching this show again. And then, like, I think a couple weeks passed, and I went back and watched the episodes I missed, and I was like, okay, it's better now. So I slowly got back into it. Now I'm referring to the episode with Fernando and Shayla. I hate that episode so much. You can watch my season 1 review of Mr. Robot if you want to know why, but I was so upset. I think it was the worst contrived BS I've ever. That episode is like the definition. You look up contrived in the dictionary, it should have like a video clip of that fucking episode. And it was so fake. It was so fake. I hated it. And plus, I just hated the Fernando's character overall. Like, when they first introduced him in the first couple episodes in season 1, I'm like, oh god, I hope we don't see this guy again. This is such a waste of time. But no, we do see him again, and it leads up to one of the worst episodes from any show, for any good show, I would say. Any good show, this is like the worst bad episode from a good show, is that. And here he is. Again. Oh my god, it's like the worst thing the show could possibly do. And it's not just... Okay, so let's just set aside my feelings toward Fernando in that episode. Set them aside. Let's pretend they don't exist. Let's pretend, for the sake of argument, I liked that episode and I liked Fernando. Oh god, it's almost painful to say that. But let's just, for the sake of argument, let's pretend that's the case. This character has already finished his arc. And he was just some thug. What possible role could he have to play in the future? And him coming back, regardless of how I feel about that, him coming back seems very contrived writing. Like, oh, this is an old character you've seen in season 1, so here he is again. When really he was like the gangster who like escaped from prison and whatever. And I'm sure they'll try to find some contrived storyline in season 4. Say, oh no, this is why he's back again. This is why. But it seems so much like a TV trope, like a TV cliche to bring him back, if you know what I'm saying. Like, regardless of how much I fucking can't stand him, just setting that aside, is such a TV trope. So god damn, that pissed me off. I cannot overstate how much that pissed me off. And I'm gonna be honest, that is the main reason why I'm not that excited about season 4, is because that's how they choose to end season 3, saying, oh, he's back. Oh, fuck you. It was such an amazing season too, and for them to throw it away with just that one clip, and not throw away the season 3 is still amazing, but to throw away my anticipation of season 4, they ruined it by showing that goddamn character again. Anyway, let's move on. Let me move on to other characters. Let me talk about Dom Di Piero. So I talked about this before in a couple of videos back. Some people were assuming, or guessing, I should say, that Dom knew about Santiago, but then we found out that wasn't the case. Last week's episode, I'm like, oh, she definitely knows about him now. But apparently she still didn't. Like, I think it's possible she was suspicious of him. Like, I think it's obvious she was, fishy of Darlene missing, whatever. But as soon as Darlene went missing and she found out that he didn't even clock Darlene in and was trying to hide the fact she was there, I mean, she should have known that Santiago was crooked. But when she encountered him in the parking lot, she was still acting like, hey boss, what are you doing? Instead of being like, pointing a gun at him, saying, I know you're fucking crooked, come with me, which is what she should have been doing. It seemed like she was suspicious of him, even at that point, but because this had been building for like forever, like in episode 7 when he was framing Trenton Mobley, you got the, idea that she knew something was up, but so I think this is I'll be quite frankly honest. I think this is a character inconsistent writing in the show. I think this is inconsistent writing as far as Dom's character goes. I don't buy that she would be this ignorant because, especially the way she's been portrayed, especially early in the season, she went up to Darlene, and when Darlene was hiding the fact of Angela, she knew Darlene was hiding something. She's like, I know you're hiding something from me. She could read Darlene. She was able to tell that. And there's this guy that she's worked very close with, and she knows very well. And he drew up so many ridiculous, obvious signs that all the audience, like even before it was officially revealed in the show, pretty much every viewer figured out that this guy was crooked. And you're going to tell me, and even after that, like after it was revealed, they even made it more obvious with the Trenton stuff and the way he kept trying to protect the Dark Army. And then Darlene goes missing, and she still isn't 100% certain. She's just slightly suspicious of him. I don't buy that. She should have known damn good. So I think this is bad writing. I'm just going to call it out. I think it's inconsistent for her character. I don't think she has not been portrayed as someone who would be that naive. But so this leads to Santiago kidnapping her, which is interesting, and it looks like she's going to die. Now we get the scene with Irving, and he takes Dom and Santiago out, and it's like it's gonna with sharpening the axe, and Santiago's like pleading, "Oh no, please don't kill her. She can be useful." Blah blah blah. I knew that Irving was going to kill Santiago. I think that was very obvious. I mean, for one thing, Santiago, like, I predicted this character would die by the end of the season. I'm actually glad he did. But I think it was pretty obvious. And because he's like a throwaway character where Dom is a good character. Like, I wouldn't put it past the show to kill her off, but I think it would hurt the show, and I just didn't think that the show would go that way, and I thought it was pretty obvious. And just the whole tone, the way Santiago was so certain that Irving, and plus Santiago was being such an asshole to Irving the whole time, like, no, you're gonna do what I want. It was so obvious. I was like, you're dead, man. You're just dead. So when Irving took the axe and killed Santiago, it was the least surprising thing in the world. Not to say I didn't like it, I loved it. It's something doesn't have to be surprising to be good, and I've just been waiting to see this fucking animal die. Now this is what was totally unexpected, that now apparently Dom is like forced to work for the Dark Army now, which I did not see this twist coming. Irving, of course, was axing Santiago, was saying, all your family members are dead. Now I did get the impression that they did sort of have Santiago. Because I think he mentioned this too in this episode, that they were threatening him. So I think it was the same sort of deal where he, and we saw him on the phone to his mother, so I think surely they threatened his mother and said, if you don't cooperate, we'll kill her or whatever. But I get the impression Santiago, even though he was like slightly under threat, I think he was more of a willing participant, like he was getting paid and that he actively wanted to help. He didn't have to be as coerced as Dom did, because Dom was, I don't give a fuck, I'm not helping you, whatever. And it wasn't until they threatened her loved ones that she's sort of doing it under threat. I do think that I think season 4 we might get a lot of Dom working for the Dark Army and being very like unhappy about it and like hating it, and by the end of season 4 she's gonna start working against them. That's my prediction. I hope maybe it works a bit earlier. I think maybe we still might get her like working with Elliot to try to undermine the Dark Army, like on the slide, while she's trying, while she's working with them overtly. I think that's gonna happen, but I don't know how long it's going to take. And I think she was a bit harsh with Darlene. She's like, you're the worst person in the world. You ruined my life. Why is she blaming her? Is it because of the 5'9" hack that set everything in motion? Why not blame Dark Army? Dark Army was the one who they also helped do 5'9", and they're the ones who were freaking threatening to kill her family, not Darlene. It seems like she was being a bit too hard on Darlene. I mean, maybe she was still pissed off about the fact that Darlene like seduced her in order to try to trick her or whatever. But her intentions were ultimately good, was to undo the 5-9 hack, which is what Dom wants. So I just think she's being, I don't know, maybe I understand like her emotions are high or whatever, but I think she was being a bit too harsh on Darlene, but that's just me. Anyway, let me get to Angela now. So this is actually, someone posted this comment on my video, I think last week. I think it was last week's video, and the dead on, they said, what if Price is Angela's father? And when I saw that comment, I was like, hey, that's actually a pretty good theory. Like, I didn't come up with it myself. But turns out, totally true. It's like, I am your father. Even though I know that's a misquote. He never said that in Empire Strikes Back, but whatever. He said, no, I am your father. Not Luke, I'm your father. But whatever. Oh, he did say I'm your father. But whatever. Anyway, so that's what Price says to Angela. I'm your father. And it does make a lot more sense now. Puts everything in context. Why he was so obsessed with her, why he was sticking out, because that was never ever clear. And before I thought it was like because he was just trying to hide her from White Rose, because he knew that he wanted to sort of use her against White Rose. But it seems like his bit was a bit more personal, and when she was like flirting with him and trying to like sort of get with him, he outright rebuffed her, so that confused me. So it made it seem like, well, he wasn't interested in her sexually, but I guess that's why people were able to guess he's her father, because that makes sense. That's why he had no interest in her that way, but he was more of trying to look at her for her as a father figure. And also, like, in episode 6, we had the flashback of Angela as a little girl, and her mother was dying, and her lawyer talked about a beneficiary. I assumed this was White Rose, but now it's very clear that was Price. The Price was the one trying to send her money and trying to send her help and trying to help her, because apparently they had been together before, and he knew that Angela was, his daughter, so that's why he was trying to help her. So yeah, that's come very clear now. So this is Angela's like in cuckoo land, and I said this at the end of last week's episode when she was picked up by those dudes. I knew, like, she thought they worked for White Rose, but I knew they worked for Price, and so I wasn't surprised at all when that was revealed. And she was like, "Oh, I just want to see White Rose, whatever." And he's trying to convince her that she's been conned, that she was lying. I'm still kind of unclear on whether or not she believed him. It does seem like she did. She's talking about sort of retribution or whatever, but I don't know, I'm not entirely sure that she did. Now let's talk about this time travel thing, because this is the big thing, and to me this is still a hanging chad, because I think the show would like you to believe that time travel is just misdirection and it doesn't exist, and that's what Price is saying to Angela, that you were conned, White Rose was lying to you. I don't know. I still, like, I'm not 100%, like, I'm still open, but I still think that in itself could be misdirection. The misdirection that it is misdirection, if you know what I'm saying. And I think it still could actually be time travel, because, alright, there's several hints in this that I think, at the very least, White Rose believes that this is true. And if White Rose believes this is true, I'm sorry, I'm more inclined to think that it is true, because White Rose seems to have a lot of power, a lot of knowledge. She's never been portrayed as someone who's just crazy or off the walls. So there's a couple clues in this episode that White Rose believes that this time travel is true. First off is when the way Price is talking to Angela. He says something like, "Oh, she's wrong," or "she's nuts," or "she doesn't know what she's talking about." It makes it sound like that he thinks that White Rose does believe in the time travel, isn't just lying, that White Rose actually does believe she can undo things. So again, if White Rose believes it, I think it's true. And the other thing is the way she was talking to her aide when she was telling him to kill himself. Is she didn't outright say kill yourself. In fact, you're kind of surprised when he shot himself in the head, because the way she was talking like, "Oh, we'll see each other again will be together again or whatever, something like that. Like is almost you would expect him to just put the gun down, go away, and run away to the Bahamas or whatever, never be seen again. But no, he shoots himself in the head. So I don't know. That scene too made it seem like I suppose she could be talking about an afterlife or something, but I didn't get that impression. I got the impression that she believes that she's going to undo everything. So if he kills himself, she's going to change time to bring him back to life. I don't know. I just really get that. Plus, like the ridiculous amounts of time travel. Like there's really hammered home Back to the Future references in this whole season, and of course, like the key that Elliot needed to undo the 5/9 hack was hidden in the Back to the Future picture. And then we also had the clip of Superman, people watching the end of the first Superman movie where he speeds around the planet really fast to undo Lois Lane's death and bring her back to life. I mean, okay, so one could say that those imagery was only implying that they're undoing the 5/9 hack, particularly like the Back to the Future picture that has the key. I think it's meant to say like that was Mr. Robot's intent. Like he puts it under the Back to the Future because you can undo the 5/9 hack. So you could say, well, it's not about time travel; it's about undoing the 5/9 hack, which is what Elliot's gonna do. But I don't know. I think it's a dual purpose. I think it's. I mean, because I don't think they would have had so many ridiculous amount of time travel references if there isn't actually going to be time travel involved. But I don't know. I still could be wrong. We'll see. That's probably the most interesting thing that I'm most interested about in seeing the next couple of seasons. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, so my rating for Shutdown out of 10 is a 7. Very good. I wanted to give this episode an 8, but I had to take it down an entire point because of the post-credit scene, because of Fernando bullshit. Sorry, but that's bullshit. Otherwise, I would have given it an 8. Not quite a 9 because some of the stuff with Dom I didn't buy. I thought was kind of bad writing. And some of the stuff with Elliot, I wish they went in a slightly different direction than what they went. And plus, I was really disappointed that we didn't get any follow-up to Krista in this episode because I think her scenes were by far my favorite scenes of the season. And we also got the big bomb dropped a couple episodes ago that she now knows that Elliot's responsible for 5/9 hack. So I was hoping to get continuation for that. But I know we'll get it in season 4. That's fine. But still, like, this episode was really intense. Like, really great scenes. But again, it had some flaws. So 7 out of 10. So that's it for my review of Shutdown, but I will be doing a live discussion video this Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S. That's 5 p.m. on the West Coast. That will be Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. for me here in New Zealand, so you can look it up, see where it is in your time zone. I'll be doing a live discussion video with my brother Afkin Tomko over on his channel, and we will be joined by Darren from D's Reviews. So it's very great for the 3 of us to get together, talk about Season 3 of Mr. Robot as a whole, so be sure to join us for that. I'll put a link to that as soon as I get the link in the description below. Also, be sure to check out my channel as I do many more videos on other shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek The Expanse, and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.